Hey everyone, Robert Ferringo back with the number 8 team in my 2023 NFL Power Rankings countdown, the Dallas Cowboys. I have a very special guest with me, Ryan Sebring. We will get to him in un momento, but first we got to pay those bills, right? If you're enjoying these videos, be sure to like and subscribe to Doc Sports YouTube channel. You will get alerts and get free plays from some of the top handicappers in the country. Also, take advantage of that link down in the description, the free $60 account at Doc Sports. That's $60, same as cash, and it can be used. By now, you're probably sick of hearing me say it in every one of these videos. But yes, you can use it for any handicapper, any package in any sport that you want, including full season football packages and preseason packages. We have 4 weeks of preseason football here, and that's a good chance to pad your bankroll before the beginning of the season. All right, very excited about this guest, Ryan Sebring, Dallas Cowboys super fan. And Ryan, I wanted to have you on for a lot of reasons. You know, I love talking to you, love talking football with you. You're a very knowledgeable football fan. I feel like you have a very good perspective on the sport, and you're very objective when it comes to a lot of things, except one thing, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, so I feel like you're going to give us a good barometer. Talking to you about the Cowboys is going to give us a real good barometer of what the public at large and a lot of bettors are thinking in their approach to this team. So my first question to you is, I have them number 8 in my NFL Power Rankings. Do you agree or disagree with that ranking? A little higher, a little lower, or right where they should be?
It probably seems about right. There's so much parity in the NFL. It's hard to have full conviction because there's a lot of teams that are pretty good. And Dallas has potential, but you have to win something. So what we're going to keep coming back to, I'm sure, over the next X amount of minutes is roster looks okay. They have the right pieces in place to do some things. But at the end of the day, you have to win. So it'd be hard for you to justify having Dallas too high, because the track record's not there for you to hang your hat on the winning. So 8 to 10 feels about right.
Okay, and where do you see them in the hierarchy of both the NFC East? You know, Philadelphia obviously won the East, won the NFC last year. How do you see Dallas in the hierarchy of the NFC East and of the larger NFC? The NFC is clearly the weaker of the two conferences. You don't have a ton of power teams, so there's a real opportunity there. Where do you see Dallas stacking up with like your San Francisco's and your Philadelphia's right now?
Well, I'll probably echo your sentiment as I got to see it to believe it. I think in the regular season, they can stack enough wins to get into the postseason, but you know, you may have to go to Philadelphia, go to San Francisco. And have you seen anything from this team that makes you believe that they can do those things? And then in the same postseason, and then go play an AFC team that probably has championship pedigree and top drawer quarterbacking. So in the context of the NFC, though, I would just say, though, they have to show me before I believe anything.
So, but you would put them third, right? Would you say that they are the third best team in the NFC, or do you think that there's somebody out there? Are you buying into Detroit? Do you think Atlanta or New Orleans can jump up there? You know, I don't think anybody really thinks Minnesota.
I probably worry more about, I mean, I know that you like Atlanta, and I think that they will take a leap, and they weren't even a bad football team last year. I just think it's worrisome in the NFC East. I look at the front seven for the Redskins, and that's a problem. You look at the Giants have been historically a winning franchise, and they had a rough patch, and they seem to be coming out of it. So there's a lot of spotlight on the Eagles and the Cowboys, but I think the Redskins and the Giants are going to be tough teams, and just getting out of the NFC East, beating each other up and stacking enough wins to get in the postseason, I don't think that's a foregone conclusion for Dallas.
Okay, so bear with me here. I have a philosophy that I've talked about a little bit, in that I sometimes feel like in all sports, championships are a little overrated, okay? In that I'm a Bears fan, right? It's been almost 40 years. And for a lot of that time, the Bears have been completely irrelevant. I would love to be a fan of a team that makes the playoffs every year. Maybe you don't win a championship, but you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're good every single year, right? Like you're playing a lot of meaningful football late in the season. You're going to the postseason. You're getting those playoff games. Maybe you don't win a championship, but the margin for error for winning a championship is so slim that those are almost fluky. Now, when I look at the Cowboys, they have had some really good teams and they've had some really good seasons even recently. But I feel like there is so much pressure that has been put on this franchise by Jerry Jones to go out and win that Super Bowl. And look, that's everybody's ultimate goal, but it's almost gotten to the point where Cowboys fans can't enjoy the fact that they have a really good team. It's almost like they don't go into the season with that excitement that, hey, we might make the playoffs. And if we get in the playoffs, anything could happen, New York Giants style, right? Like, do you feel like that pressure to win a championship is almost an anchor? It's almost like a dark cloud that's kind of hanging over this coaching staff, these players, this fan base, everything else.
Yeah, no, I try to enjoy it, but the profile of the organization and the team just lends itself to that they're in the spotlight. And if anything, they're America's team that people want to root against and see fail and see the forlorn look on Jerry Jones's face. So as a Cowboys fan, it's like by this point, we're kind of beaten down by a lot of that stuff. I definitely try to enjoy the players. And certainly, I'm sure we'll talk about Micah Parsons. And, even if we were terrible and 1-15, I'd watch all the games just to watch him. And frankly, if we get away from all the metrics and getting into the minutia of all the different teams, I just want to throw out there that I believe in him, that all the kind of losing around Dallas and all the big situation, whether it's Romo, Dak, the lines, the coaching, whatever it comes down to, that now we have an intangible. We have something you can't quantify on game day, and that's Micah Parsons. So if anything, I'm going into this season maybe with extra hope, because I don't think he's a loser. I don't think he likes that narrative of the Cowboys being the butt of all jokes and not being physical enough to beat the Eagles and the Niners and all that talk. And if anything, because of him, I really believe Bobby. But in general, as a fan, I think we're just beaten down by the narrative in the national media, which always has the Cowboys in a spotlight. Jerry Jones is always forecasting big things, and it seems like we come up short, but so do 31 other teams, to your point.
Yeah, exactly. And these last 2 years, the Cowboys haven't just been good. They haven't just been a fun team to watch, good in the standings, winning a lot of games. They're the number one team in the NFL over the last 2 years against the spread. They're 24-10 against the spread. Now, if any team did that, that would be impressive, right? But the fact that the Cowboys, who, to your point, are the public team, they're the team that one of the teams that the books have to shade the lines on, say, no, they're going to get that Cowboy action, that no matter where the bar had been set for this team the last 2 years, they have beaten it. I mean, 24-10, that is absolutely no joke. Do you think, put your gambling hat on here for a second, going into the season, do you think that this team is going to be able, maybe not sustain that rate? I don't see them going 13-5 or 12-5 against the spread again this year. But do you think that they can have another profitable season? Do you think that this team might actually be even a little bit better than people realize?
I had more conviction in the Orioles, and I will about and Maryland basketball as well, two of my other favorite teams. I think you can cash with the Cowboys because winning teams cash tickets normally. And to your point, people are always betting on Dallas, but maybe the last couple of years, people were losing steam because if you probably look at the 10 years before the last two, Dallas was probably one of the worst teams against the spread. So I think the one concern for me this year against the spread, we've been creating so many turnovers. We've been one of the top teams in that and getting some extra possessions that maybe if we're not number one in turnover, then we don't have a few of those extra points in those games, and that might hurt us against the spread. So I don't think we'll cash the way we have the last 2 years, but I still think we could have a winning mark against the spread.
Okay, the big storyline is obviously Mike McCarthy's decision to let Kellen Moore walk, right? Didn't philosophical differences on what Moore was doing with the offense. And why not get rid of a guy who had 2 number one offenses in the last 4 years and 3 top 6 scoring offenses? But, you understand where McCarthy's coming from a little bit. You also recognize the talent of Moore and what you've seen over the last few years. So break that down for me. Like, where do you come down on that decision, and how do you see that kind of playing out for the Cowboys this year?
I'm a traditional NFC East Bill Parcells type of guy. So I'd rather see Dallas win every game 16-13 and only take the risk that they need to take to win the football game. Now, it hasn't been like that over the last 30 or 40 years because I can't ever remember a winning Dallas team that where the defensive unit was better than the offense. So it's just kind of a cultural shift in the whole organization as a fan that we went from 2 or 3 years ago where the team scored every single time they had the ball, and now our defense is the more trustworthy unit. And Kellen Moore, thanks for everything you did. I tip my hat to him. He was very creative. He's always great the first 8 or 9 weeks of the year. But once the tape's out there and the rubber meets the road and you get a little deeper into the season, I didn't think the play calling was concise and simple enough. And he took too much risks and, plays taking too long to develop, whatever you may say. And by the end of the year, I wanted change. And I frankly wanted something more conservative and more predicated around the run and just, hey, get a first down or two, flip field position. We don't always need points because our defense will go and turn them over and make a play for us. We don't need to always be taking the risks that we took offensively.
No, I agree with you 1,000%. Yeah, I agree with you 1,000% on all that. I mean, it's funny though that the new dynasty is the Chiefs, and they have done so on the back of Patrick Mahomes and outscoring people. But again, maybe they're kind of an outlier. To win, football is still a violent game. It's still a physical, violent game. And the more physical, more violent team is going to win more than they lose, and the team that can kind of take care of the ball and impose their will. But this kind of begs the question, is Mike McCarthy savvy enough, smart enough, good enough to win those types of games? If you're not beating people by outscoring them, shooting them out, stuff like that, you're going to play those close, tight, hard-fought games. Do you have enough trust in McCarthy that he can execute and kind of, he's been kind of an incompetent game manager, frankly, the last
I would say
years.
no.
Yeah. What do you think about McCarthy?
But here's where my confidence is when he got the job with Dallas, I read that analytics, was the new way for him. So what I'm hoping is that he just pre-structures the game plan using analytics and understanding the approach and the play calling that we need to do. And I think in general, we'll have a good game plan. Now, to your point, within the game with 2 minutes left in each half and managing the game, timeouts, making a really good play call in a really important situation, do I have trust in those things? Probably not as much. And once again, he'll have to show me that against the Redskins on the road, that front seven, you need to get 7 or 8 yards in the fourth quarter on a passing play. Can you dial it up? So we'll see.
Okay, you have to win in football. You have to win in the trenches at some point. And one of the things that I have to give the Cowboys a lot of credit for over the last 10 or 12 years is drafting and developing offensive linemen. They have consistently had one of the 5, 6, 7 best offensive lines in football over the last decade. Guys getting older, got some contract issues. Do you still have that level of confidence in the offensive line going into the season? Because, the style of play that they want, run the ball, control the clock, they have all the skill position players. They got a lot of talent. But if they're not good up front or as good as they have been, the rest of that stuff is going to fall apart. So where are you at with the offensive line heading into the season?
I love the starters. I mean, Tyler Smith was a revelation last year. If we could keep Tyron healthy for 13 or 14 games, our starting 5, Zach Martin never comes back to camp, is an excellent unit. If anything, I was going to ask you because our depth is very worrisome. There's not a swing tackle that I really trust. The rookie from North Carolina, Seam Richards, maybe he could add some guard depth, but I don't see that backup center that I trust. I don't see a backup tackle. They could move Tyler out there, obviously, to handle that, but it's worrisome. But I like the starters, and I think they're good. And I want to get back to the point you made about Kansas City is that they might be a bit Mahomes in offense, but Chris Jones in that defense is pretty elite too, and they have some elite offensive linemen in Kansas City. So definitely give Pat Mahomes his due, but I think in the trenches, both sides of the ball, Kansas City, very formidable. But you could probably speak better to Dallas's backups.
I don't know if a lot of people admitted it last year, but I feel like they really missed Amari Cooper, frankly. Okay. When they had CeeDee Lamb is a butt beast. Michael Gallup is who Michael Gallup is, a really, really good number 3. They lacked that third receiver. You look at like Cincinnati. Cincinnati, say what you want about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but Tyler Boyd is really, really good too. Having that third guy makes a big difference. Do you think Brandon Cooks is going to be able to come in and be that third guy for them? And do you expect, with the focus shifting back to the running game, do you think that he's going to be able to have a big impact on that offense?
I mean, he talks about 1,000 yards. I don't know if I see that, but I want to get back to Michael Gallup because he was a shell of himself last year. I mean, he was terrible. He wasn't any good at all, and he was a real weapon the preceding years. And Dallas tried to get out in front of that because someone probably, if he didn't have that knee injury, he was going to get some money, and he wasn't going to be a Dallas Cowboy. So that knee injury was, and then last year not being able to perform, but now hopefully this year he'll get back to where he was a full year removed from that knee injury and get back to the player that he was. And then Cooks, they could use him in a number of different ways. If anything, all three of those guys could be a slot, an outside. And depending on the matchups and the corners we're playing against, I think they could all be a big factor. But I don't see Brandon Cooks, like, as I said, being 1,000-yard guys per se, because I'm not sure if there's enough targets to go around. And we don't have Dalton Schultz anymore. You're probably going to ask me. He's the ultimate safety blanket for Dak, but I think that these other young tight ends are just going to grow into that role, and he's going to use them in similar fashion. But I would still think CD, that when we're throwing the football, we're going to give him top consideration. And then based around what teams are doing, hey, if you're singling CD Lamb, we're going to wear you out with that. If you're doubling CD, then we have to see where the other spots on the field, either in the slot or on the outside, to see if Gallup or Cooks would be that guy. So I think neither one of those guys is going to be consistent. It's just going to be based on the defense and how the game is unfolding, where we can take advantage where one of those guys has a favorable matchup.
All right, shifting gears, getting on the other side of the ball on defense. You mentioned him before. I couldn't wait to talk about him either with Micah Parsons. Basically, there's two guys in the NFL that I say they're demigods, right? One of them is Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald, I have a 10-year-old son. We always call him Thanos. He's like the human version of Thanos. He's a real-life Thanos. Micah Parsons, I don't even know what he is. Is he Lawrence Taylor reincarnated? Like I don't even know. He just plays the game at such a different speed than everyone else. He is a real demigod. Is that going to be enough as a focal point on this defense?
I love Micah. He gives me hope. And he is, I never thought I would compare a quarterback to Joe Montana. And Joe Burrow, really, I think if you're on the air, you can make that comparison. And it's almost taboo. Same thing with Lawrence Taylor. If you would have told me 20 years ago I'd go on the air and compare someone legitimately against Lawrence Taylor, I'd been like, there's no chance of that. Micah is probably the closest thing to that, and I think it's a legitimate comparison, and it gives me hope. I don't like it how Dallas has come out and said, hey, he's going to be more of a full-time defensive lineman. Why would you tip your hand, going into the season? I feel like you'd want to leave it more up in the air, the role that he's going to play. And I'm sure you asked me about Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator. So the combination of Parsons being an on-field leader with his dynamic talent, with Dan Quinn, who has – and you look at our secondary and guys that are free safety, linebacker hybrids, and we play a bunch of different crazy formations and how we can match up against you, it gives me a lot of hope. And this is the strength of the team. And that's why if the rookie from Michigan can come in and anchor the line with our interior linemen and stop that power running game that teams use against us to keep our offense off the field and to really grind us out and tear down our will the last couple of years, then I'll be really hopeful. But it's just tough for me to see a rookie interior defensive lineman. It's like, doesn't he need some weight, Bobby? Doesn't he need some time against grown men before he's really going to be that factor? I'm not sure that, Mazzie Smith, that this is the year that he ascends. But the defensive line as a whole has really good depth. And I think the secondary has really good depth. It's just where the linebacker, do we have the right depth there? But I think this is the strength of the team, Bobby, and Mike is definitely the guy and the playmaker.
Well, yeah, you hit on all the things that I plan to ask you about. The first being, you watch this team pretty closely. How much do you attribute to Dan Quinn and the scheme? How much do you just attribute to having a guy like Micah Parsons who is just going to wreck everything that every offense tries to do anyway, and some of the other high-end talent players that they have over there. It can be both. It's obviously a blend of both, but what are your impressions of Dan Quinn? How much credit do you give him for the scheme that Dallas has used to have 2 top 10 scoring defenses in each of the last 2 years?
I would just say if you look at the defense the year before he took over, I mean, literally, we gave up a touchdown every single possession. And I'll tell you another thing, the 20 years probably before that, just that we were in a desert of creating turnovers. I mean, maybe we had 1 or 2 years over a rolling 20-year period where we had created significant turnovers. So just now that, hey, I think we've literally led the NFL the last 2 years in generating turnovers. So just the mentality of a defense, it's not bend and not break. I mean, we are attacking, we are getting downhill, we are taking the football away. And I give all that credit to Dan Quinn. And it really seems to me that it's hard for the league to make adjustments, that the way he moves guys around and his game plan, that there's not a lot of patterns there. And that he'll take his guys and do whatever he can on any given week to try to match up. But I think that it's been tough for him against the pure run it. You've seen it against the Eagles and San Francisco, teams that can run it right up the middle and use that play action game. It's been successful against Dallas. So hopefully they can clean up some of that interior line stuff, that you can only coach that so much, because if your guy gets pushed off the ball, right, that's not coaching. So hopefully we have some better personnel between Smith and Hankins to hold up in the interior. But the scheme week to week and as a whole in our personnel and how interchangeable it is, I think that's all Dan Quinn, and he deserves all the credit.
Yeah, 33 turnovers forced last year, number 1 in the NFL. The turnovers have helped Dallas. They've been in the top. They're the only team in the NFL that's been in the top 5 in defensive yards per point. That's one of my kind of favorite metrics.
I know you like that
in
metric.
evaluation. It brings a lot of things into it. But no team in the last 10 years has finished in the top 5 in defensive yards per point 3 straight seasons. They're adding Stephen Gilmore to that secondary, which is excellent. I'm a big fan of Hooker. Diggs, we all know who he is and what he's about. Do you worry about those turnovers drying up? Because that's one of those kind of fluky stats in the NFL that really isn't fluid year to year. If you go back over the last 25 years, there are those teams, Ravens, Steelers, Patriots, that have shown consistent excellence in forcing turnovers. Do you see that and feel that about this group? Or is that one of those things coming into the season, you're like, if we're not creating as many turnovers as we have the last 2 years, we might get exposed. Teams might be able to push us around a little bit.
I don't believe it. I just think actually the volume of turnovers has probably helped to the spread for Dallas being really that 24-10 or whatever you said that they've been against the spread. But what I'm thinking this year is they won't have the volume of turnovers, but maybe the timing of the turnovers, where Micah just kind of puts his foot down, fourth quarter, looks like he's going to rush. He backs into the passing lane, deflection, stuff like that. So I don't think that will, let's say, be a top 3 or 4 team, because this stuff is definitely cyclical. And even if we're an aggressive top drawer defense, teams may do more conservative play calling, right? And not run as many plays to lend to the turnovers. But I'm thinking that Dallas can get important turnovers in timely situations just because of the caliber of personnel that we have. And now with Gilmore, maybe you have to throw at Diggs. So we basically led the league in turnovers last year, and Diggs only had maybe a handful of interceptions. Hey, maybe he can get a few more grabs this year because Gilmore locks down his side of the field. But I do think, to your point, that you're right, that that's a cyclical thing. I wouldn't hang my hat on it. But I think that because of the quality of the players, they can get timely turnovers in big games. And they're going to play. You look at the schedule. I don't know if we're going to look at it super closely, but it's rugged.
Where we're going next, actually.
It's very, very rugged, and there's a lot of parity. As I said, as good as Dallas is, there's not a lot of breathing room in that schedule, and it's going to be very difficult, like you said, to get to that 11 wins. I think 10 wins, hopefully, will be comfortable enough to get them in the postseason. But with this schedule, 11 might be tough.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the dirty little secrets about Philadelphia last year, and not to take anything away from the Eagles. The Eagles were fantastic last year. I was writing late in the season. I thought they were better than the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I thought they were going to win that game. And if they had won that game and won that Super Bowl, I said this in another video, I almost feel like last year's Eagle team, if they had won the championship, that they would have been kind of an all-time great team that people didn't realize was an all-time great team. The team I kind of compared them to was that 93 Washington Redskins team, right? Like that's a top 5 all-time great team, the way that they dominated, but people never bring them up because they weren't a dynasty. They didn't have this big run or whatever. So, but one of the things, the secrets about Philadelphia last year in the NFC East as a whole is that easy schedule. They played one of the easiest schedules in football. I always say that if you get to cross over with the AFC South, you're probably going to have a pretty good year. This year, the Cowboys and the rest of the East do not have that benefit. They cross over with the AFC East, which for my money is the second best division in football. No easy games among those 4 teams. The Cowboys have 6 primetime games, which can set up letdowns the next week, lead to some short weeks. They play 4 of their first 6 on the road, and they have 3 short weeks throughout the season. So are they going to be victims of their own popularity this year with this schedule?
As I said, I mean, that's the one thing in all this discussion is like I feel good about the team, okay about the coaching, very nervous about the schedule. And I know I've said it 3 times already, but just the overall parity in the National Football League. So you're shedding on light on some things that we know are going to be tough games, but there's some other games in there too that maybe the casual Cowboy fans is already chalking up for a win. And I'm not sure that it's going to be as easy as they think it is, you know? I see very few, even a game like the Cardinals, let's say, with no Kyler Murray. We know that there's depth on that roster. Maybe the Rams still aren't built back up, but I don't see a lot of holes where they have a chance to breathe.
That's a tough game. You go to San Francisco on a Sunday night, come back the next week and play at the Chargers on a Monday night. It's one of those situations. Are they going to spend the week on the West Coast? Are they going to go back and forth to Dallas, wherever? But 2 primetime games in a row. Then you come home where they'll probably be close to a double-digit favorite against the Rams. They're better than the Rams, but the Rams can still play. Sean McVay can do that's like the quintessential Cowboys letdown spot. I already see them as 9.5-point favorites and see them down 14-0 in the first quarter of that game.
Well, Bobby, what if they started 0-2? So if you look at their first 2 games at the Giants in a primetime game, and then they're home against the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, who went to Lake Travis High School, by the way, the last time that Lake Travis beat Westlake. But what if Dallas starts 0-2? You know, how does that kind of change the potential storyline for the season, and how do they cope with that? You know, I'd be interested in see how they would deal with that adversity. But hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100%. You're 0-2. Let's say you go into Arizona and you beat the Cardinals. Then you come home and you got to deal with Bill Belichick before that 49ers and Chargers game. Like 2-4 isn't out of the question.
No.
Right? I think they're a better team than that. I don't think that'll happen, but it absolutely could. And if it does, then you have everybody starting to talk about, do they miss Kellen Moore? Oh, Mike McCarthy. And then these things just have a way of snowballing into problems.
And even if they're playing well, they could still lose 1-possession games, right? So they could play good football and lose a bunch of 21-17 games, and you're 3-3, you're 4-4. So I don't maybe see the 2-4. I feel like they would circle the wagons and get desperate, but it may be a lot of 3-3, 4-4, and I'm trying to look at the spot in the schedule where I could say, hey, this is where they could make their move, let's say, and win 3 or 4 in a row. Nothing jumps out to me.
Like that November. Again, the Giants at home at Carolina, and then they get 3 straight home games right there. And, the Thanksgiving game, then they have another Thursday game. I feel like that's where things soften up a little bit. But, Seattle at home, Philadelphia at home, still not easy games, but that's where they're going to make some hay. But again, you got to keep your head above water to get to that point. And okay, so we've set it up, right? We've set up the offense, defense, the coaching, all of that. So the number right now, I'm gonna say that it's I've seen this number, their season 1 total number at 9.5, and I've seen it at 10.5. Okay, 2 completely different things. At 9.5, I kind of like the over because I think they have the talent of a 10-win team. But at 10.5. With this schedule, I don't see this team winning 12 games again. So from a betting perspective, you got $1,000 and you got to put it down on the Cowboys season win total. Where are you going with these guys?
I'm right there with you. I'd go over 9.5, but under 10.5. And the thing is, if you bet over 10.5, what you're basically saying is that Tony Pollard coming off his injury, he's going to stay healthy. Tyron Smith's going to play a bunch of games, because if they have a major injury, and there's a bunch of vulnerable, I don't want to say a bunch, but they have a few vulnerable positions where if you bet that over and you're looking for 11 wins, you need a healthy football team, all year. That's my feeling. With the over 9.5, I feel like they could have struggled with the schedule, have an injury or two, but still cobble together the 10 wins and get into the postseason.
Yeah, 1,000%. You can't handicap injuries. That's the case for all these teams. Ryan,
but doesn't it feel like if you went over and you thought 11 wins though, that's like, man, what if Tony Pollard goes down? And we start Malik Davis and Deuce Vaughn, against the Redskins front seven. So I just feel like if you go,
this is why for me the height of stupidity is anyone that places a futures bet on a team to win the Super Bowl, right? Like the odds, the payout isn't good enough to justify it, but you're basically making like a 20-team parlay, basically, because you need your team to stay healthy. You need them to play well. You need them to win games and get those fluky bounces. You need all that to happen just to make the playoffs. And then once you make the playoffs, now basically you're into a 3 or 4 team parlay where they have to beat 2 or 3 of the best teams in their conference, and then, oh, by the way, beat whoever came out of the other conference to win the Super Bowl. That's why I've never made a bet on a team to win the Super Bowl in my life, and I never will, because there's just, like we're talking about the Cowboys. They come in, we both kind of agree that they come in. I have them number 8 in the NFL. We both agree that they're kind of number 3, maybe number 4. Like they're in that top tier in the NFC. And even the two of us are like, yeah, they might only win 9 or 10 games. You know what I mean? That's life in the big leagues, right?
To say that's the NFL, where if we were talking about, hey, which teams are bad? Are there even bad teams anymore? I mean, literally of the 32 teams, I'd say there's always a couple, but I'd say 28 or 29 of them. But let's say 28 or 29 of the 32 that you could paint a scenario where they could go 9-8 or something, and be a winning team. Even if we don't love their roster, very few just outright bad teams. So I think 10 or 11 wins in this current landscape is pretty successful, really.
Thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for giving me your time. You're absolutely going to be coming back on during this football season. We're going to keep up with the Cowboys, and I'd love to get your thoughts on just some of the other teams throughout the NFL. Like I said, you're real sharp NFL mind. So he is Ryan Sebring. I am Robert Ferringo. We are Doc Sports. Be sure to check in tomorrow for the number 7 team on my NFL Power Rankings countdown. Till then, carpe diem and good luck.